She just dropped back into it.
You can ask Joe if you want.
Yeah, I think that's the way I read it.
On this membership, is it okay addressing it to Gail? Or
Sure.
okay.
I'm
I'm happy if everybody,
not quite sure what she's doing. Can we have one? Megan, before she's going to be downstairs.
I think you guys are quorum.
Alternate.
ah, there,
Are you the chairman of the meeting today?
okay. Yes, sir.
Jeff Sanders.
Jeff, good to meet
Yes, I'm
you.
with CDOT.
Oh,
And,
excellent.
Craig asked me to come down and talk for a little bit today about a project we're working on.
Right, we have you on the agenda. That I saw.
Okay.
I did read the agenda.
All right, well, just want to introduce myself and.
Well, glad to meet you.
Okay.
We'll look forward to it. Thank
All
you,
right,
sir.
you bet.
Good morning. We'll call the meeting to order shortly after 9 o'clock, 9:32. Does appear that we have a quorum. This is custom. We'll start with introductions and
Okay,
go in that way.
okay.
How does that work on minutes when they point? Oh,
It's
pardon
all
me,
right.
this
She's
is
got it.
government, serious stuff. Yeah.
Okay, I'm Sharon Brown. I represent the city of Fountain.
Liz Robertson, DVR.
Kevin Girardi, Discover Goodwill.
Red Bull, Silver Key.
Michelle Dean, Amlicab.
Jacob Hansen, Mountain Metro Transit.
Joe Urban, Area Agency on Aging.
Dick Hyde, Community Intersections.
Joe Vaccaro, Community at Large.
Fred Hare, Yellow Cab Company. And in the audience, if you would.
Kristen Amundsen, Discover Goodwill.
Stacy Dowles, Rocky Mountain Healthcare.
Megan Karch, DVR.
I'm Jeff Sanders with CDOT.
Good morning and welcome. Has everybody had a chance to take a look at the agenda? And if so, are there any additions or corrections to the agenda? If none, could I have a motion that the agenda be approved?
Second.
Agenda is approved. Easy money.
Could you do a vote on that?
Thank you. It's a long story.
Did you upset your friend?
Of all the junk I've done, I still can't talk. Different order that I'm used to, but number 2 on the agenda are membership appointments, 2 of which came with your package, and there is a third that was distributed just before the meeting. On Mountain Metro and Amlicab look relatively routine to me, as does the third. But is there any discussion on the membership changes and additions?
Question for Michelle. Are you coming on as an alternate or as a primary?
My understanding was that I was going to be an alternate.
Okay. Thank you.
I move that we accept these membership appointments.
Second.
Agreed. And I think that's proper and ask that they be forwarded to the executive committee for approval.
They'll go to the board.
Or to the board for approval. All right. Thank you, Brett.
We need to take a vote.
Oh,
Would be nice.
all right. All in favor? Signify by saying aye. And opposed? Motion does carry. Robert's Rules of Order.
Congratulations.
See, minutes should be second. That's why. No. Approval of the minutes is next on the agenda, and I was not at last meeting, so I have no opinion. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion that minutes be approved as written?
Sure, went out. I'll do it.
Pardon me?
So motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Most excellent. Are there any public comments on items that are not on the agenda?
The audience is racing up here.
Fred, I would ask one thing. Bethany's put together a list of what we've got for current contact information for everybody relative to phone numbers, email addresses, that type of thing. She's trying to update that list, so if it's okay, I'm going to pass this around during the meeting. If you could check your organization and make sure that the information that we've got for them is correct.
Certainly. Not a problem. Next would be training and information sharing or coordination opportunities. I'll throw in 2 cents worth on call centers. We recently, actually,
I don't know if I said it, Silver Key is expanding. We got a grant to go out east, and we should be, currently, we go all the way up to Shoup. We're even going up into Glen Eagle, just a couple of tributaries north of Northgate, up in there. And then Shoup all the way over. We jump up to Swan Lake. This is all Black Forest area. And then to Volmer and down. And about halfway between the Springs and Falcon. Hopefully we'll be in Falcon by June of next year. It'll be a limited time frame until we see how many other people, but
Any idea on your limited, days of the week or anything like that? Any
no, it'll
idea?
be all 5 days, but it'd be like, we'll swing through. I got 2 drivers that I have their garages in Calhan and then on Brule Lane, which is just about halfway on
Yeah.
Woodman. So they would be picking people up probably 8:30 that would need to come in. We still do door through door, but we're entertained. We had some people from Calhan that said they don't have any problem driving into Falcon to get on in. So there's some things going on, and now we're going all the way right with Constitution and 24 and Mark Shuffle. We hadn't gone past Mark Shuffle. We're grabbing that subdivision in there now. So just be aware, I've talked with Dennis down at Fountain Valley, and we talked a little bit about, scratching each other's backs there, but still honoring some contracts that we had. But with this grant, we're showing a little bit. We're getting people up in the Banning Lewis area, right there, Mark Shuffle and whatever. But anyhow, just let you know that we are moving there. You know anybody that needs a ride out there, tell them to give us a call.
So Brad, you're picking up more than just people who are seniors then?
No, we're only still, seniors are ADA approved.
Okay.
And what was the other thing I was going to say? It is the thingamajigger. The grant, there it is. The grant is specifically for medical trips.
Okay.
excellent. Does that help with the northern hospitals, or were you already serving those?
We were already serving like St. Francis and all, no problem. But from east of St. Francis, we weren't doing a whole lot.
Got it.
So the grant, are you going to roll any more money into that to pick other people up, or are you just going to stick with the medical appointments right now?
Just the medical right now. The grant was only for a driver and a data analyst, nothing for the rides itself.
Oh, okay.
So we're still working on that. She's about to submit for the second year to this grant, whether we can get it a second year and maybe get some ride money in too. But that's out of my ballpark. But as it stands, it's just medical trips.
Fred, I also wanted to add that we're beginning a little bit late, actually, the 5310 and actually the faster coordination process, Faster and 5310 coordination process that we do every year relative to vehicles. So if you are involved in that process and you'd like to talk to me after the meeting, I will give you the details. We're going to try to probably schedule the first meeting following the call center meeting next week. Call center meeting, I believe, is at 1 o'clock, so we'll probably schedule it for 2 o'clock next Tuesday, November the 1st. So I think most of the folks that have been involved with that in the past know who they are, and I'm assuming it would be the same players generally.
All right, thank you. And then, information sharing on call centers. We transferred our telephone operations to Rome, Georgia, which is thankfully not a great deal similar to what our plans are here. But I learned a couple of things. Make sure your technology is in order, that the phones are actually ringing in the call center, and have people on location in case they're not. Technology proved to be a challenge. And the other challenge is what our call center calls nuances and what I call stuff you should have known before you sat down to answer the phone. You can argue about the nomenclature, but we had one experienced person on hand, and upon further review, I might have sent a person with different experience and perhaps 2 or 3 instead of just one. But those were some of the challenges. Jacob and Mountain Metro Mobility might have been involved in some of those challenges because it took a while to get that ironed out. I'm sure it'll work just fine, but with some interesting stuff that came up that more or less surprised me. That being said, here's hoping it works like it's supposed to. Fortunately, I ran my mouth long enough. On the agenda, we do have a presentation from CDOT, and Jeff is here to speak to us. We appreciate you coming down, Jeff. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Jeff Sanders. It's nice to be down here this morning and talk with you. I came primarily to discuss a project that we're working on, and the project pertains to a couple of federal transit programs that CDOT administers, the Section 5310 and the Section 5311 programs. My guess is that most of you are familiar with the Section 5310 programs. That's the federal government's program for specialized transportation, a program that provides grants primarily to nonprofit agencies to purchase vehicles, to build facilities. It can also be used for operating grants as well. And while I'm on this topic, maybe I just put in, make sure everyone is aware that CDOT right now is we're accepting applications for capital grants. And when I say capital, what that refers to typically is grants to purchase a vehicle of some kind, whether it's a van or a cutaway. I'll talk for a few minutes about some of the grant programs that we have. But we're in the middle of an application period right now where we're up through November 30th. Now, some of you guys might not you might not be eligible for some of the grants that we deal with at CDOT. So let me just go down and just describe what grants we're talking about here. Let's start with the FASTER program. The FASTER program are state funds, and there's about $15 million in the FASTER program. $3 million of those dollars CDOT uses to operate bus staying, which of course connects Colorado Springs with Denver. It also goes up to Fort Collins and to Glenwood Springs. We have about $4 million that are used for vehicle purchases all around the state. And I know that Silver Key, for instance, has been the recipient of a couple of those grants. Mountain Metro Transit every year gets about $700,000 in those grants. It's open to primarily to government agencies, but it can also be open to nonprofits. Those grants cover 80% of the cost of a vehicle. There's, and I'll be, direct here. If you've received a grant from CDOT, you know that there's a little bit of stress and work that comes along with administering that grant, actually getting the money in your hand. There's a lot of strings that are attached with these grants often. But, I think a lot of people in the end decide it's worth it. We see a number of grants that go out, like I said, for 80% of the cost of the vehicle. And so we know that you guys are using these vehicles and putting them to good use. So CDOT oversees the FASTER program. There's also some federal programs that CDOT oversees. One of those that we're going to talk about today is the 5311 program. That's a rural public transportation program. And I don't think any of you guys here in this room are eligible for this particular program. But it's mostly for agencies that operate outside of the Colorado Springs urban area. So let me think of one.
Most of the agencies do already.
Operate outside of the
City limits.
of the city limits.
Somebody's got to cover the rural area.
So the urban area exceeds more than is more than just Colorado Springs. It's also other areas, and I mean the census makes that map. But you also have to provide public transportation, regular public transportation, where you serve all members of the community. My guess is most of you here serve either the elderly or people with disabilities, those types of groups. So that's the 5311 program, and that's actually one of the larger programs we have. I'll talk a little bit more about that. The other is the 5310 program. Like I said, that's the federal program for specialized transit for senior citizens and people with disabilities. The FTA makes this very confusing. They divide the 5310 program into different pots of money depending on where in the state your agency is located. So there's a 5310 rural, which is for rural areas outside of the urban areas. There's a 5310 small urban, and we've got 6 small urban areas, I believe, around the state. Those are places like Grand Junction, Greeley, Longmont area. Pueblo is also a small urban area. And they have their own dedicated set of funds. And then there's a 5310 large urban. And there's 3 large urban areas in Colorado: Fort Collins, Denver, and Colorado Springs. CDOT actually administers the 5310 money for the Denver area. But here down in Colorado Springs, Transfort is the designated recipient for the 5310 funds. And so each designated recipient gets to basically decide what they want to do with the money. In the case of Denver, that CDOT oversees, we often give most of that money out as grants to private nonprofits in the area to run call centers or to help operate their agencies. Now, what I'm going to talk about today, and I can actually go into a lot of detail on this. I gave a presentation about this a few weeks ago, about a month ago at CASTA, which is the Colorado Association of Transit Agencies. We held our conference up in Snowmass last month, and I gave probably about a 45-minute or an hour presentation on this. And I'm not going to do that today. But I do want to hit a few of the high points and just let you guys be aware of what's going on in the state. Before I do that, let me go back to what I mentioned at the beginning. We are in the middle of accepting applications for capital-type projects. So if you are considering, and we used to do this 3 or 4 times a year, depending. We do this just for FASTER, and then we'd make awards. A few months later, we'd do one for 5310 and make awards, and then a few months later, we'd do one for 5311. We said, that's a little bit too confusing. We'll do a combined call for capital projects where we just do this once a year. We accept all these applications, and then CDOT decides what's the best funding source, how best to pay for it. And then we make our awards, and that usually happens sometime in February. So if you think that, if you're not sure if you're eligible, if your agency is eligible, come talk to me, and we can figure that out. Otherwise, if you know you're eligible, as in the case of Silver Key, Fountain Valley Senior Center, for instance, recently also got a grant from us. Anyway, come talk with me afterwards. I'll make sure that if you're not aware of it, I'll provide you what information you need. So, let's see, let me start this presentation here. All right, at this point, are there any questions about anything I just mentioned or any other thoughts? Yeah.
Somewhere during the process, can you talk about the coordination component that we're starting here next week?
Yes, and I don't know too much about it, but I'll mention that under one of our items. So CDOT has a lot of latitude in how it administers these federal programs, these 5310 and 11 programs. But and remember, when I'm talking about 5310, I'm talking about pretty much the rest of the state other than Colorado Springs, is transport as well, or Fort Collins as well. But CDOT administers the 5310 program in other parts of the state outside of those two areas. And we've decided that we need to introduce a little bit more equitable and fairness into it. And there's some situations I'll point out that people have wondered, I think we need to relook at this process. It was the distribution process. This process we put into place 25 years ago, and a number of things have changed, and so CDOT is starting to look at it again in response to some of these concerns. We actually started doing this several months ago. We're about halfway through. Our goal is to get a final policy for how CDOT distributes its 5310 and 11 programs sometime in the next 6 or 7 months. It's a very long process, but because it affects so many transit providers in the state of Colorado, we wanted to provide as much opportunity for involvement to help people feel comfortable with it. To be frank, there are going to be some winners and losers as a result of this. Some agencies that have been used to receiving transit funds from Colorado or from CDOT, there's the potential that level of funding could decrease as a result of the policy changes that we make. Let me just mention one other thing as well. What I'm mostly talking about today are operating grants from these two different programs. Operating grants that help pay for fuel, pay for drivers. There's also capital grants that pay for vehicles, but we're not really touching those. And our programs are split. We give about half of our grants are for operating, and then half are for capital. And I'm just going to talk about operating today. So today, I'll provide some background information on 5310 and 11, describe why we're doing this, what we've learned so far, as well as talk about some of the next steps. So this is our 5311 program. We get about $11 million every year from the federal government. Some of that is used for state administration. We pay our own salaries with that. Some of it, the feds say that you have to use at least 15% of it for inner city bus service. So we help subsidize some of the routes that connect different communities throughout Colorado. For instance, there's a route that goes from Salt Lake to Denver along US 40. So it goes through like Routt County, Moffat County and Routt County, Steamboat Springs, and then connects into I-70 and continues on to Denver. We help subsidize that route. You guys probably all aware there's rarely any routes in public transit that actually make money, that pay for themselves. Most public transit is a type of service that oftentimes requires subsidies just because, given the nature of the type of service that we do. But most of our 5311 funds go to operating. That's the green value, the green color there. Some of it goes to capital projects. Now, this actually shows who received the 5311 operating grant from CDOT in 2016. Probably hard to see some of that. But those two largest grants there is RAFTA. It's a Roaring Fork Transit Agency in Glenwood Springs and Aspen. They get about $1 million grant. Second is Durango. That's about a $900,000 grant. And then I'm just going down here and seeing if there's some in the area. Expresses. Upper Arkansas, I know that's a couple hours away. Yeah, there's just not many in this general area here that receive a 5311 operating grant. But the smallest one we have is about $35,000. Pretty small, Dolores County. It's basically a senior service that provides trips to anyone, not just seniors. And by offering trips to anyone, they qualify for this 5311. Here's the same thing, just broken up by from a spatial, from a map. Yep, and I just don't see any that are close here in Colorado Springs. So a few points on why CDOT is looking to redo its formula for how it distributes this 5311 program. One is that we really aren't getting any increased funding from the federal government. It used to be that we got huge increases every year during the 90s and early 2000s, but then that's pretty much dried up. There's more competition for funds these days. I'm speaking with 6 or 7 agencies around the state that are either new or already existing and don't receive a grant from CDOT, who are now interested in receiving an operating grant from CDOT. This is an opportunity to introduce performance as a factor in our formula. Right now, performance is not really considered. And there's really no funding for these new entrants. So I've listed here Woodland Park. Now, is Woodland Park, do they come here to these meetings? Maggie Reed.
Yes, come to
They
see.
do some,
Okay.
yes.
They will be coming.
Okay.
Yes.
They've had some transition.
Okay.
Okay, yes.
Well, Maggie Reed with the Teller County Senior Center, I think, who she's with. She actually gets a fairly large 5310 grant. Oh, is Cripple Creek, too, in this area?
Yeah.
Okay. So,
It's all Teller County.
okay. Cripple Creek gets a 5311 operating grant from us. But Maggie Reed with Teller Senior Center,
So Senior Coalition.
Senior Coalition, she's approached CDOT about getting a 5311 operating grant. Right now, we don't have any money to offer. We hand out what we have available already in grants, and so it's prompted the question of, well, how do we need to redistribute this money in a way that's transparent, that's fair and equitable, because we have this demand for increased services around the state, and that's really what we're doing. Is unfortunately we still have the same. The pie is still the same. We just need to reslice the pie and slice it into, in most cases, smaller slices, because our federal funding is not growing.
Are these applications for these different fundings, 5310 and 5311, are they going directly to CDOT, or is it going through the MPO here first?
The one for capital grants, which is due at the end of November, you guys, I think, prioritize your needs here within the MPO.
That's what I was talking about.
And that's what you were mentioning, yeah. So every year we've gotten that letter from PPACG that says these are our identified needs. And I can't remember what they are now, but we take that into account when we make our capital awards.
In essence, what we do is we get together in that coordination group, and CDOT looks much more favorably on a group that
Yeah, we
plays well in
started
the
that quite a
sandbox
few
with
years
each
ago,
other.
just for that purpose.
Okay.
So this is
I
just,
know in the history of this committee from 20 years ago or so.
this is a table I've shown that shows that there's really not much sense to how CDOT currently distributes our 5311 operating grants. These are three agencies. I've hidden their names to protect the innocent, I guess. But they're fixed route services that serve a similar clientele, have similar operating characteristics. You can see their revenue vehicle miles, the size of their fleet, and then you have the grant that they receive from CDOT down below there. And it kind of doesn't make any sense. I mean, Agency C has by far the lowest amount of revenue vehicles. They have the smallest fleet, yet their grant is easily the largest of all three of these. Agency B, they run over 2 million miles, but their grant is just over $300,000. There's examples of this all through all through our distribution awards, and so this is, I showed you just trying to make the case that there's some issues with how we've been doing things that have developed over the years, and so this is why CDOT is looking to change things up. That's just another thing. I'm not going to go into that. So this is not a decision that my group in CDOT is making ourselves. My group is the Division of Transit and Rail within CDOT. We actually have other groups at CDOT that are going to weigh in. The STAC, for instance, is a statewide transportation advisory committee. Craig Casper sits on the STAC. It's composed of people from every transportation planning region around the state. I think there's something like 15 of these TPRs, they're called. Down here in Colorado Springs, PPACG has a representative that sits on this. And so they represent their interests, and they're very interested in this project that we're doing. There's also this Transit and Rail Advisory Committee, which is a committee that meets 4 times a year. The TRAC, they're also going to be part in this, and we'll be presenting our recommendations going forward. So it's not something that CDOT is doing by itself. I'm not going to go too much into this, but except to say that we've had a few focus groups over the summer to help give us some feedback, discuss the issues. When you start talking about a formula for how you distribute the funds, it gets very complicated very quickly. And we're asking people to wear 2 hats. We're asking them to wear the hat of their agency that wants to protect the amount of money that they get. We're also asking them to wear their statewide interest hat and say what's best for the overall state, what's going to promote transit. We had 2 different focus groups. We had one that focused on problems for 5311, the other that focused on problems for 5310. Maggie Reed with Teller County was on the 5310. And she was very vocal, I think was a good representative. I'm going to skip these here. Some of what we heard in our focus groups is, well, let's see, what can I present here? We started talking about, so in the end we want to come up with a formula, like this is how we're going to distribute. A plus B plus C equals the amount of funding that you get. And an important question is what are the criteria that are part of that formula? Should it be population, the amount of population that they serve? Should it be the amount of revenue vehicle miles that their vehicles go? What we heard is that there is good support for populations to count that becomes a factor. However, it's complicated by resort areas where the city might only be 10,000 people year-round, but they've got 40,000 people, and their infrastructure is sized to accommodate 40,000 people. Land area was something we were considering as a factor, but decided in the end that it's not a very good thing to use. We also heard feedback on the process. If you're making decisions and people are losing money or gaining money, there should be a reasonable transition period so that these agencies have an opportunity to meet the new reality. That's the situation with the Teller Senior Coalition. One of the proposed changes that we've talked about, and we're still a long ways away from doing that, is in the 5310 program, where there's so much need for just the basic infrastructure, basic vehicles. We're leaning towards only making grants to purchase vehicles and not making grants to help operate those vehicles. That affects a few agencies. In particular, it affects the Teller Senior Coalition, who's gotten a $100,000 grant from CDOT over the last couple of years. And that's partly why actually Maggie is looking at the 5311 program instead and saying, well, if you might do away with this source of funding, I'm going to look for other sources of funding. And that's why she's looking at the 5311 program. So let me just spend 2 minutes talking about what we're doing next. We had some focus groups, got some good ideas. Now we're putting together a subcommittee of the TRAC, which is this Transit Rail Advisory Committee. And they're going to help us come up with a policy framework, sort of establish some goals of what we want to accomplish with these programs. We'll start talking about criteria, and what I mean by that are these factors that are going to be part of the eventual formula. And then combine those together into a formula, and then we'll move into this, and then make awards, and then move into this transition period where agencies have to adjust to their new award amount. Those are members of the TRAC. So let me go back to a question you had about coordination. Coordination is a prerequisite to receive a 5310 program. If you were to apply for a vehicle from CDOT, one of the first questions on there is, identify for us, tell us about your participation in coordination, and tell us how the type of project that you want is identified in your coordination plan. Every planning area, region in the state has its own transportation plan, transit plan, including PPACG and some of the other areas where you guys are located. Central Front Range, for instance, is the planning area that's just west of here that takes in Teller County. They've got their own transit plan. And so when Maggie applies for a vehicle, she has to talk about the coordination, her agency's involvement with coordination, how much she's come to meetings like this, for instance, or how much she participated in the creation of this transit plan. And she actually has to identify where her project is identified in the plan. So most of these plans talk about, maintaining the current level of vehicles, for instance. And so people would identify that as one of the goals of their plan. So this particular council that you guys are doing here is a requirement in order to enable those that participate to receive a grant from CDOT. So are there any questions about that or anything about this particular effort that we're doing, or about applying for capital projects or anything like that?
I do have one question.
Sure, yes.
How is CDOT looking at more innovative approaches to transportation, mass transit in particular? There are lots of different ways of doing it, as you well know, from things like feeder buses in different communities down to the main routes. That's one possibility, which may also eliminate some of the need for metro mobility, which is very expensive. Have things like that, are they being considered or prioritized in any way in respect to that innovation?
One of, one of the innovations out there is in the world of demand response, where, you have companies like Uber and Lyft that are using the applications on your phone to essentially, to get a ride, an on-demand ride, and you have this roving vehicles out there that work for Uber and Lyft, and they get an alert on their phone that someone's 2 miles away needs a ride from point A to point B, and a price is agreed upon immediately. That's happening in the private world, but there's also a lot of people asking questions about how we can bring that over into the type of services that you guys are operating, where, say, a senior center, for instance, a dial-a-ride. Someone needs a ride, they'll go pick up their house. Usually they have to make an appointment 24 hours in advance or something like that. Well, how can we use this technology and these models of getting rides and bring that over into the public sector? And CDOT is always, our grants are for vehicles and for operating grants mostly, but we also have an eligible type of project are these technology projects that look at getting more technology and incorporating that into the fleet that you have. So that's one thing. The other thing is that CDOT as an agency, we look at the statewide transit network in rural areas, as well as connecting these rural areas to other parts of the state. We don't get too much into the metropolitan transit providers like Transport or Mountain Metro Transit or RTD in Denver. We allow those agencies to do what they want within their world. They get their own federal funding sources. RTD gets its own tax money, for instance. So CDOT doesn't really interfere with what RTD and Mountain Metro are doing. But we are very interested in making a good statewide transit network. And part of that was what led to us, CDOT, creating Bustang, which currently now provides trips from Colorado Springs to Denver, Glenwood Springs to Denver, and Fort Collins to Denver. And we're looking at ways to expand that as well. Eventually, our hope is to go from not just stop at Colorado Springs, but go down to Pueblo, and to make more stops between Colorado Springs and Denver. And to do that in other parts of the state as well, because we have these really great local transit systems, but there hasn't been a lot of ways to actually connect the transit systems. And that's kind of how the highway side of CDOT works as well. 2/3 of CDOT money goes to intercity roadways, the state highway network, the federal highway network, and about 1/3 goes to local, more local jurisdictions for their local roads. So Bustang is one innovation I guess we feel like we're making at CDOT.
Maybe we have weekend service with Bustang at some point?
We don't know. The mission of Bustang is to help commuters for this at this point, but we are getting a lot of interest. In the world, I mentioned that public transit doesn't make money, and in fact, a lot of public transit routes, only about the fare boxes and payments and advertising only pays for about 15 or 20% of the route. But with Bustang, we're approaching 60% of our fares are paying for the service. So it's been very successful. The buses that go from Denver to Glenwood Springs are almost filled completely. Not so much the case for Colorado Springs to Denver. And so we're looking to beef up the advertising down here to get more ridership. But that is expanding to later service, to weekend service, is something that we're getting a lot of requests for and something that we'll look to.
Bronco games, that would.
Yeah, actually, it was something we just started. It was more as a publicity thing to get Bustang's name out there. But we started providing a couple of buses to make trips to the Broncos game. I saw another question over here.
I just wanted to clarify, so the current 5310 is just for capital? Or-
So it's a good question, and it depends on, and it's going to get complicated quickly.
Yeah.
It depends on where in the state you are.
Okay.
So where is your agency in Colorado Springs?
We are, and so my other question to stem off that is if we get together with the committee and kind of prioritize, is it just for people that service rural, or?
Majority service in rural areas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any percentage you can give, like, or how to help us figure that out?
Well, it's I've only been doing this for a couple of years, but where I've seen it done is we ask you to provide the number of miles that your vehicles go within the urban area, and how much do they go outside of the urban area. And then your trips, or your clients. Are your clients mostly, are the trips within the urban area or are they outside of the urban area? So I need to talk with you to get some more information about that. Now, if you're a 5310, if you're looking for a grant for 5310, currently there are 3 different types of eligible projects. There's capital, there's operating, and there's mobility management. We have about 7 mobility managers around the state that we're helping to pay for. And an idea that came out of the focus groups was that for this rural pot of money that we do away with operating grants so that we can maximize mobility managers and purchasing of vehicles. If you end up, your agency is in Colorado Springs, you have to work with Mountain Metro Transit to, and I think it varies every year, Mountain Metro. I mean, sometimes you provide some grants, but then other years you don't. But Mountain Metro has discretion in how they work with their 5310 pot.
Yeah, it's my understanding there isn't one this year that went to the call center.
Well, part of it goes to the call center, yeah. Yeah, and that's a lot of what we'll be doing next week, actually. Can you talk a little bit about where closed versus open fits into this picture?
Closed service versus open door service. I'll talk about
requirements.
Yeah. In terms of our pots of money that CDOT administers, the FASTER program, we require open door service for the FASTER program. So you can still serve primarily seniors and people with disabilities, but it can't be for a real narrow clientele. Like a previous job was that I worked at a group home for people with disabilities with cerebral palsy, and we had 20 people in our organization. You can't use FASTER money to buy a vehicle to only serve those 20 people. But if you're a service that, like a senior center, that provides trips to all seniors in a community, then you're eligible for FASTER. And that's a little bit more generous than, or it's a little bit less generous than the 5310 program, which you can be a closed door server. You can be a private nonprofit that serves a really narrow community. Now, at CDOT, so that's what the federal government says. But CDOT says we would prefer to give 5310 grants that serve a wider variety of people in their community. You know, there's so much demand for these funds. We just want to see it serving as many people. So how CDOT views closed door and open door, we view closed door as you're serving a very narrow clientele, your own clientele. Open door, it's more open to anyone in the community. They might need to sign up or something. But for like a senior center, they're willing to serve anyone in their community as long as they, there's probably a low bar to get a ride from them. I don't know if that helped answer your question. Yeah.
I have a question, or I guess clarity on the Teller County idea. So you're saying that they can go for the 5311 funding. Now that goes to the county technically, right? Not the senior center, or are they kind of together in that scenario?
Well, we can make awards, 5311 award, whether it's to a private nonprofit like Teller Senior Coalition, or to a
you have
government.
the option then, okay.
It depends on who applies for it.
Okay.
So like Montrose, for instance, All Points Transit is actually a private nonprofit, but they provide, something like 500,000 trips in their community. They've applied the money, and so we've evaluated them as the eligible applicant.
Okay. All right.
Any other questions? Well, I brought some business cards, and so I'll leave them with Fred. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to give me a call. Like I said, we're currently accepting applications for vehicles right now. We have about $15 million that we give out every year. If you have questions about whether your agency is eligible, I think that's a good place to start. Go ahead and just feel free to give me a call.
Thank you.
Okay.
Jeff, thank you very much. We appreciate it. I have to have my presentation. Number 8 is Medicaid Transportation Subcommittee topics with no particular name on it.
I believe that was included, Fred, in lieu of the Medicaid meeting that we were having before. Sometimes there will not be any.
Okay. Is anybody aware of any issues on that? Next would be action items for the next meeting.
How do we end up meeting on a Thursday?
Oh, I didn't even look at, is that
We're
really?
looking at the date, December 8th is on a Thursday.
I think that might have been put together because of the fact that we don't have a December meeting.
You mean a November meeting?
It lands on Thanksgiving.
Oh, it was Thanksgiving
No one's
week.
coming?
Yeah, I'm just curious, that's all. And that will take care of it until January's meeting, I assume? Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
So there's no meeting on the 22nd of November. Is that correct?
Exactly. So next meeting would be December 8th, replacing the November meeting, and perhaps the December meeting, which probably falls real close to Christmas Day anyway.
I won't be here.
Christmas Day's a Sunday.
All right. We've reached the end of it. We'll adjourn the meeting approximately 10:25. Thank you all for your kindness in attending.
Hey, Joe, when is that meeting on Thursday, the 1st?
It's
Or
actually
Tuesday.
Tuesday the 1st, and that's the core, well, there's two meetings